The first scream came from the co-pilot's side, a strangled cry that cut through the roar of the rotors. The night sky over Kunar province was black and sharp with mountain ridges, and tracer fire stitched across the darkness like burning red thread. Sergeant Maya Rios gritted her teeth, shoved the collective down, and threw the UH-60 Ghosthawk into a stomach-churning dive. "Jesus Christ, Maya, we're dropping like a stone," yelled Chief Warrant Officer Blake Danner, his knuckles white on the edge of the console. "That's the point," she shot back, her voice flat. "Hang on." The terrain-following radar wailed as they plunged into the jagged canyon. The Ghosthawk's stealth-coated rotors screamed in protest, the airframe vibrating so hard Maya thought her fillings might rattle out. Bullets carved orange sparks off the rear stabilizer, and then the mountain swallowed them whole. The tracers disappeared. Silence except for the tortured whine of turbines. She yanked the stick, pulling them inches over a frozen river, skimming so low the downwash sprayed shards of ice off the water. The chopper lurched but held. Behind her, strapped into the jump seats, the 4 Rangers stayed silent, helmets bowed, knuckles locked around their rifles. They'd all stopped mocking her choice of aircraft about 3 minutes ago. "Altitude 30 feet, Danner muttered. His voice trembled. "We clear." "Clear enough to die quietly," Maya said, eyes scanning the terrain. Sweat dripped from her brow even though the cockpit was freezing. "Tell me if we get radar locked." They flew blind through black canyons, hugging the terrain so tight that one wrong twitch would send them cartwheeling through rock. Somewhere above and behind, the insurgents' anti-air batteries were still searching the sky for them. They'd expected a lumbering C-47 Chinook or a standard UH-60 Black Hawk, not a Ghosthawk slipping through radar nets like smoke. And that was why she'd chosen it. The mission had gone to hell in under 90 seconds. They were supposed to exfil an intelligence team pinned in a village north of the Pakistani border. The team had made it to the landing zone with half their number bleeding out, but enemy reinforcements had rolled in fast, technicals, mortars, belt-fed machine guns. Maya had barely gotten her skids off the dirt before the air lit up with incoming fire. If she'd flown anything heavier, they'd be dead now. "Talk to me, Maya," said Captain Rory Vance from the cabin. His voice was calm, which meant he was scared out of his mind. "Are we still en route?" "Yes, sir," she said, eyes locked on the NAV screen. "About 8 minutes to the refuel point." "Enemy pursuit?" "Nothing on sensors. Doesn't mean they're not out there." "Copy." Danner glanced at her. "You think they'll risk chasing us at low altitude?" "They'll risk anything," she replied. "They know we've got their intel package on board." As if on cue, something bright streaked overhead, a white-hot arc across the stars, followed by a dull whomp of detonation far behind. Not close but too close for comfort. Everyone in the cabin turned to look. No one spoke. Then Maya jammed the throttle forward and the Ghosthawk leapt. The radio crackled with static, then a burst of words. "Ghosthawk 1, this is Watchtower. Be advised, fast movers on approach vector from the east. Possible Mi-24 Hind gunships. You are weapons free." Danner swore. "Hinds? Are they out of their minds?" "They're desperate," Maya cut him off. "And they think we're slow." She flicked on the Ghosthawk's electronic countermeasure suite. The displays bathed the cockpit in ghostly green light. Her heart hammered. The Hind was an armored beast, built to tear apart helicopters. But it was loud, easy to spot on radar. They could outrun it, if they didn't make a single mistake. For a few minutes, nothing moved but the ground rushing beneath them. Then the threat radar screamed. "Contact 2 o'clock high," Danner barked. "They've got lock." Deploying flares. Maya thumbed the switch. Brilliant white streaks shot from the tail as she corkscrewed down into the canyon. A missile tore past their rotors and exploded against the cliffs, showering rock. The Ghosthawk shuddered violently. Someone in the back vomited. "Ghosthawk 1, status?" crackled the radio. "Still alive," Maya hissed, yanking the stick. The rotors clipped a pine tree and shredded it. "Won't be if I slow down." They dove through a ravine so narrow that the rotor tips missed the walls by inches. The pursuing Hinds couldn't follow. Their radar signatures faded behind the ridgeline. For the first time in 15 minutes, Maya let out a breath. Danner stared at her, eyes wild. "You're absolutely insane." "That's why they hired me." The radio cut back in, this time on the local encrypted net. "Ghosthawk 1, this is Forward Base Raptor. Your fuel bird's waiting on grid 234. You're cutting it close." "Story of my life," she muttered. "Copy. Ghosthawk 1 inbound." They skimmed another frozen river, passed through a gap in the ridges, and there was the forward arming and refuel point, a dark patch of flat ground lit only by faint chem lights. 2 fuel bladders and a pair of jumpy-looking mechanics crouched by a light utility truck. No structures, no cover, just naked exposure in hostile country. She flared and set the Ghosthawk down so hard the skid sparked. The instant the rotors spun down enough, the Rangers bailed out, forming a tight perimeter. Maya popped the canopy, lungs aching from the adrenaline. Her legs trembled as she climbed out, and the icy wind bit through her flight suit. The mountains loomed black all around. 6 minutes, full top off, barked the chief mechanic. His beard was white with frost. That's all we can give you. That's all I need, Maya said. Make it 4. While the fuel lines hissed and clanked, she walked a perimeter with Vance. He was tall, square-jawed, too calm. The kind of officer who never raised his voice but made people obey him anyway. He watched her the way you watch a live grenade. They don't like you, he said quietly, nodding toward the Rangers. They were whispering and glancing at her between scanning their sectors. They don't have to, she replied. They just have to be alive when we land. You picked the Ghosthawk. That's what they're pissed about. Because it's experimental. Because it's weird, she said. And quiet. And fast. And invisible to half the radar in the region. Which is why they're breathing right now. Vance's eyes flickered. Fair. Before either of them could say more, a flare went up on the ridgeline, brilliant green, hanging in the black sky. Everyone froze. Then someone shouted, "Contact North Ridge." Gunfire ripped through the night. Maya sprinted for the cockpit as rounds sparked off the truck. One mechanic went down screaming. The Rangers lit up the ridge with tracers. She slammed into her seat, slammed the battery switches, and the Ghosthawk's engines shrieked to life. Danner was already strapping in, his hands moving like blurs on the console. Fuel lines still attached, he barked. They've got mortars, Maya snapped. We stay, we die. She punched the release. Fuel sprayed like mist as the line ripped free. The rotors hit full scream. A mortar landed where the mechanics had been standing and turned them into red mist. Maya yanked the stick and the Ghosthawk clawed into the sky, kicking up a vortex of debris. Rangers aboard? She shouted over the comm. 3 aboard, 1 down, came Vance's voice ragged. We couldn't reach him. The Ghosthawk banked hard as more mortars slammed into the clearing below. She didn't answer. She couldn't. Every nerve in her body was fire. They cleared the ridgeline by inches and plunged into the black valleys again, weaving through stone teeth as the world behind them burned. Minutes later, silence. No pursuit, no radar pings, no gunfire. Just the hiss of wind over the fuselage and the distant howl of wolves. Danner sat slumped in his seat, eyes glassy. Say it, Maya muttered. Say what? Whatever insult you've been holding in. He gave a shaky laugh. I was going to say you're terrifying. But I think I'm just glad you're on our side. She almost smiled. Almost. They flew for another hour through dead black wilderness until the forward base loomed on the horizon, a dim smear of lights in a sea of darkness. Maya flared over the wire and settled onto the pad like she was setting down a glass of water. The medics rushed the cargo bay and dragged out the surviving intel team, still bleeding but breathing. The 3 surviving Rangers stumbled out behind them, helmets off, faces pale. General Howard Briggs, the base commander, strode onto the pad with his greatcoat flapping in the downwash. He was a broad, iron-haired man with a chest full of ribbons and a stare like a hammer. He stopped at the foot of the Ghosthawk, looking up at her. Rios, he barked. You're late. Had to take the scenic route, she said, unclipping her harness. You lost a man. Yes, sir. And you kept the package intact. Yes, sir. Briggs looked at the sleek, angular shape of the Ghosthawk, still humming with residual heat. You could have taken a standard Black Hawk. Heavier armor, more lift, more firepower. Yes, sir. He nodded once, slowly. But you didn't. No, sir. Why? Maya met his gaze, unflinching. Because this one can disappear. Briggs's mouth twitched, almost a smile. He turned to the crowd of watching soldiers, their faces pale and stunned. She chose the Ghosthawk, he said simply. Then he walked away. The pad went silent. Maya sat back down in the cockpit, hands shaking, and stared at the instrument panel until the blur of adrenaline faded. Danner sat next to her, still as stone. Out on the tarmac, the Rangers stood in a huddle, talking in low voices, casting quick glances her way. Not mocking now. Just wary. When she finally climbed down, her knees almost gave. The cold bit into her bones and exhaustion crashed over her like a wave. She made it to the edge of the pad before Vance stepped into her path. He didn't say anything for a long time, just studied her with those calm, haunted eyes. "You saved 9 people tonight," he said at last. "I lost one. You saved 9. She didn't argue. Couldn't. She just nodded once and walked past him into the darkness, the rotor's ghostly echo fading behind her, already knowing this wasn't over. Not even close. The Ghosthawk wasn't done with her, and neither was the war. Sergeant Maya Rios woke to the sound of distant rotors and the smell of burned jet fuel. Her bunk creaked as she sat up, head pounding like someone was hammering nails into her skull. The barracks were cold, damp from mountain fog, the kind of cold that soaked into the bones. Her flight suit lay crumpled on the floor where she dropped it 5 hours ago. 5 hours of sleep, if that counted as sleep at all. It had been more like shutting down. Outside, the forward base hummed like a restless animal. Generators rumbled. Radios crackled. Somewhere, someone was screaming at a private to move faster. The war didn't stop because she was tired. She splashed icy water on her face at the sink, watching it drip from her chin into the cracked porcelain. Her reflection looked worse than she felt. Eyes bloodshot. Skin pale. Black hair tangled into knots from her helmet. She looked like someone who'd been halfway to hell and flown back without landing. Maybe that was true. A voice barked from the doorway. "Rios. Briefing room. Now." She turned. Chief Warrant Officer Blake Danner leaned against the frame, coffee in hand, eyes rimmed red. He looked as wrecked as she felt, but his voice was steady. That worried her more than if he'd been shouting. "Let me guess," she said. "We're getting medals." "Not exactly." She zipped up her flight suit and followed him through the maze of sandbagged corridors and metal huts. Soldiers moved around them with quick, clipped efficiency, heads down, voices low. No one met her eyes. That wasn't unusual. Pilots were already half mythical to the ground pounders, but Maya knew it was more than that. Word had gotten around about what she'd done last night. About how she'd chosen the UH-60 Ghosthawk. About how she'd flown it like she had a death wish and lived. The briefing room was small, windowless, and too warm. A map of Kunar province covered one wall, dotted with red and blue markers like a game board that only psychopaths would play. General Howard Briggs stood at the head of the table, hands clasped behind his back. His iron-gray hair was perfectly combed, as if he hadn't slept at all. Captain Rory Vance sat at the table, helmet in his lap, posture like a coiled spring. 3 other officers she didn't recognize flanked him, their uniforms spotless, their expressions carved from stone. Briggs didn't waste time. At 0300 this morning, Signals Intelligence confirmed enemy forces are mobilizing out of the Pesh Valley. They're consolidating every asset they've got. Mortars, manpads, anti-armor, you name it. Our analysts believe they've identified our forward bases and plan to wipe them off the map before winter. Nothing new there, Danner muttered. Briggs ignored him. We also intercepted chatter referencing the silent black bird. That's you, Rios. You embarrassed them. So they want your head on a spike. Maya crossed her arms. They'll have to catch me first. That's the idea. Briggs stabbed a finger at the map. There's a command node deep in the valley here. Hardened bunkers, radio relay, underground ammo caches. It's coordinating their push. We want it gone before they can launch. Airstrikes off the table, too much civilian risk. That means boots and rotors. Extraction. Vance asked quietly. Exactly, Briggs said. We're sending in Vance's team. Your job, Rios, is to get them there and back without alerting every hostile with a trigger finger. Danner snorted. So, a milk run. Briggs's eyes were cold steel. This is not a milk run. This is a hornet's nest dipped in gasoline. You'll be out of range of support. No QRF. No gunships on standby. If you're compromised, you're on your own. Maya's heartbeat thudded in her ears, but her voice stayed level. Why us? Because, Briggs said, no one else can get in there undetected. And because they won't be looking for the Ghosthawk. The room went still. The unspoken thing hung in the air. If she failed, no one was coming. Not rescue. Not recovery. Just silence in the dark. Briggs leaned in slightly. You can say no. No one will think less of you. She met his eyes. You know I'm not going to. A faint smile ghosted across his face. That's why I asked. The planning session lasted 2 hours. Every meter of terrain between the base and the valley was scrutinized like it was the surface of the moon. Vance's rangers would fast rope onto a ridge 2 clicks from the target, hike in under cover of darkness. Plant demolition charges on the comm arrays and exfil before dawn. The Ghosthawk would loiter low in a blind canyon, engines on standby, ready for immediate pickup. The entire op depended on not being seen. When they finally broke, Danner shoved his hands in his pockets as they walked back to the hangar. You know this is suicide, right? Only if we're sloppy, Maya said. Sloppy gets defined differently when the other guy's got 9K-38 Igla launchers. She stopped, looking him in the eye. You scared? He thought about it, then nodded. Yeah. Terrified. Good, she said. Stay that way. It'll keep us alive. The Ghosthawk crouched in the hangar like a sleeping predator, matte black and angular, all cruel edges and quiet menace. Mechanics swarmed around it, refitting countermeasure pods, swapping out worn rotor blades, checking the stealth skin for micro-tears. It still bore the scars of last night's escape, scorched paint, a dented stabilizer, but it looked ready to kill. Or die. Maya walked its length, trailing her fingers along the fuselage. It wasn't like other birds. It didn't just fly. It slipped. It whispered through radar nets, skimmed valleys like a shadow, disappeared when you blinked. It had saved her once. She hoped it would do it again. By dusk they were airborne. The Ghosthawk lifted from the pad like smoke rising, barely disturbing the dust. The base shrank behind them, swallowed by the endless black sea of mountains. The sun bled out across the horizon, leaving the world a cold, sharp silhouette. Inside the cockpit, only the dim green glow of instruments lit their faces. The flight out was long, silent, and tense. The Ghosthawk's terrain-following autopilot hummed softly as it hugged the contours, dipping and weaving through canyons so close the walls scraped their wingtips. The night vision display painted the world in eerie shades of green and black. Not even the moon dared show its face. In the back, Vance's team sat motionless, rifles across their knees, eyes hidden behind NVGs. Maya could feel their distrust like static in the air. They still didn't like her. That was fine. She didn't need their affection. She just needed their silence. An hour out, the first sign of trouble appeared. A heat bloom on the infrared display, tiny, high on a ridge, motionless. Too warm to be rock. Too small to be a vehicle. Human. Spotter, Danner murmured. Yeah, she said. Could be hunting. Could be waiting. She banked gently, altering their course by 2 degrees. The heat signature didn't move. She watched it until the mountain swallowed it from view, her grip on the stick just a little too tight. They hit the insertion ridge at 2217 local. Maya hovered 30 feet off the ground while the Rangers fast-roped into the snow like silent ghosts. No radio chatter, no lights, just shapes dissolving into the darkness. Vance was last. He looked up at her for half a heartbeat, then vanished into the trees. Teams away, Danner said quietly. Copy. Moving to standby. They slid off the ridge, engines throttled back to a whisper, and sank into a narrow ravine 2 clicks east. Maya found a flat ledge halfway up the canyon wall, barely wide enough to perch on, and set the skids down like she was placing glass on glass. She killed the NAV lights. Darkness swallowed them. Then there was nothing to do but wait. Waiting was always the worst. The cockpit turned into a coffin. Time stretched, warped. The silence got into your head, made you hear things that weren't there. Maya sat motionless, helmet off, listening to her own heartbeat. Danner chewed silently on an energy bar, eyes on the instruments, as if staring hard enough would keep the world from changing. At 2303 the world changed. The radio hissed to life. Eagle 1 to Ghosthawk. Package planted. Comma ray down. Beginning exfil. Maya exhaled slowly. Copy Eagle 1. LZ unchanged. We're spinning rotors. She powered up, the Ghosthawk's engine spooling to a soft, predatory whine. The rotors blurred overhead, throwing snow from the ledge. Danner's hands moved over the console, waking systems from their slumber. Everything hummed. Everything was ready. Then the threat radar screamed. A sharp, continuous tone. Lock. From the south. Maya's blood went cold. Missile lock. South Ridge. Range? Danner's voice was too calm. Close. A flash lit the sky. White hot. Fast. Missile inbound, she barked. She slammed the collective, flares streaking from the tail. The Ghosthawk leapt off the ledge as the missile howled past and slammed into the canyon wall. The explosion turned rock to shrapnel. The shockwave slapped them sideways, alarms howling. Danner cursed, fighting the controls with her. Who the hell knows we're here? He shouted. Doesn't matter, she hissed. We're blown. The radio crackled with Vance's voice, ragged. Ghosthawk, we've got company. Multiple hostiles closing fast. Request immediate. Gunfire drowned him out. Maya didn't hesitate. Hold on. She hauled the Ghosthawk around, engines screaming. They skimmed the canyon floor at suicidal speed, rotor wash blasting snow into wideout. Tracer rounds slashed past them like fiery wasps. She didn't care. She shoved the throttle to the stops, the airframe rattling so hard her teeth ached. Terrain ahead, Danner warned. I see it. They burst out of the canyon mouth into a moonlit valley, and straight into chaos. Figures darted through the snow below, muzzle flashes strobing. The Rangers were pinned behind a fallen tree, gunfire stitching the ground around them. At least 20 hostiles ringed the clearing, dark shapes moving with predatory coordination. Jesus, Danner breathed. Maya dropped the Ghosthawk like a stone. She hit the ground hard enough to make the skids shriek, ramp already lowering. Go, 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 she yelled over the loudspeaker. The Rangers broke from cover in a dead sprint. Bullets chewed the snow around them. One went down screaming, blood spraying from his leg. Vance grabbed him by the vest and hauled him the last 10 meters. They piled into the bay as Maya yanked the collective, the Ghosthawk clawing for the sky amid a hurricane of lead. Everyone aboard. Vance gasped into the comm. Copy. Hold tight. 2 more missiles streaked from the treeline. She popped flares, banked so hard her vision tunneled, and both warheads veered off into the night. The Ghosthawk shot over the ridge, rotor tips brushing the pines, and plunged back into the canyons like a shadow fleeing the moon. The radio crackled again. One hostile hello lifting, Me-24 coming fast. Of course it is, Maya growled. Danner's fingers blurred on the ECM panel. They've got radar lock already? Not for long. The Hind roared into view behind them, searchlights blazing, cannon spitting fire. The Ghosthawk shuddered under the shockwave of passing rounds. Maya cut hard left into a narrow ravine, flares streaking. The Hind followed, closer, spitting fury. Any bright ideas? Danner yelled. Just one. She dove. The canyon walls blurred past meters from their wingtips. Alarm screamed. The Hind followed, too fast, too heavy. Maya skimmed the river, ice exploding in the rotor wash, then pulled up sharp at the last second. The Hind tried to follow. It didn't. The explosion painted the night white. They burst over the ridge and into open sky. Silence except for the gasping of their own breath. Danner let out a strangled laugh. You're going to kill me. Get in line. Behind them the valley burned. They limped back toward base, one Ranger bleeding out on the floor, everyone silent. The Ghosthawk hummed like a whisper through the night. Maya stared straight ahead, hands steady, heart hammering. They'd won. Maybe. But as the base lights flickered on the horizon, she couldn't shake the cold knot in her gut. Someone had known they were coming. Someone had been waiting. This wasn't over. Not even close. The hangar doors screeched open as the UH-60 Ghosthawk rolled in, rotors spinning down with a tired groan. Snow, ash, and streaks of dried blood clung to its fuselage like war paint. Tech crews rushed in, ducking under the slowing blades, their faces tight and pale. The medics were faster. They tore the wounded Ranger from the cabin, his blood pooling black on the floor as they sprinted toward the field hospital. Maya Rios stayed in the cockpit until the last blade stopped. She didn't trust her legs yet. Her hands were still welded to the cyclic, trembling. Sweat ran down her spine despite the cold. Her ears rang, a high-pitched ghost of the missile alarms. Only when she noticed the streak of blood on her boot, someone else's, not hers, did she unbuckle and stand. Her knees wobbled. The hangar seemed to tilt. She forced herself down the ramp. Blake Danner was already outside, headset off, arguing with a cluster of flight techs who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. His face was pale and hard, jaw locked. Hydraulics barely held, one tech was saying. Left tail rotors cracked, stealth skins delaminating. This thing shouldn't be flying. Danner's reply was flat. Then fix it before she has to fly again. The tech swallowed and nodded. They scattered. Danner turned to Maya as she approached. His eyes were bloodshot but sharp. We made it. Barely. You didn't flinch. I didn't have time to. That earned the faintest twitch of a smile. Then the smile died. Command wants you in debrief. Now. Her stomach sank. Of course they do. He hesitated, then lowered his voice. Something's off. Those guys were dug in. Waiting. Like they had our flight plan. I know, she said softly. Then don't say it in front of Briggs until you know who's listening. The walk to command felt longer than the whole mission. The base had gone quiet, too quiet. Soldiers still moved through the corridors, but slower, glancing at her from the corners of their eyes like she was radioactive. Word of the ambush had already spread. They knew someone had tried to kill her, and almost succeeded. Inside the air was hot and dry. The debrief room was small, its only light a harsh lamp over the table. General Howard Briggs sat at the head, face unreadable. Rory Vance sat across from him, arms crossed tightly, fresh bandages on his cheek. The rest of his team stood behind him like silent statues, all grim faces and hollow eyes. Briggs gestured. Sit. Maya sat. Her flight suit was still stiff with someone else's blood. Briggs spoke without preamble. The mission succeeded. The enemy command node is confirmed destroyed. Satellite shows total radio blackout in the Pesh Valley. You cut their lines clean. That part is commendable. He let the silence hang like a blade. But you were ambushed. Explain. Vance's jaw worked. They were already there. Positions dug in, overlapping fields of fire, manpads prepped. That wasn't bad luck. That was foreknowledge. Briggs's eyes shifted to Maya. Your assessment? She forced her voice steady. They knew. Somehow they knew we were coming. Briggs leaned back. And yet you got them all out alive. Not all, Vance said, voice like broken glass. Corporal Jensen's leg is gone. He'll be on a medevac out of Bugram Airfield by dawn. If he lives that long. Briggs didn't flinch. War has costs. That snapped something in Vance. He slammed a fist on the table. War doesn't have to mean walking into a slaughter because someone leaked our op plan. The room went still. Briggs's eyes narrowed, but his voice stayed calm. Are you accusing someone? Yes, Vance hissed. I'm accusing whoever the hell fed our position to the enemy. Maya's heartbeat thudded. Briggs's gaze flicked between them, calculating. Then he stood. This meeting is over. You will not speak of this outside this room. Dismissed. Vance surged to his feet. With respect, sir? Dismissed. Vance bit off whatever he was going to say. He stalked out, his team following like shadows. Briggs waited until the door closed, then spoke quietly to Maya. Find out who did it. She blinked. Me? You. No one will suspect you're looking. Quietly. No paper trail. If this gets out, morale collapses. Understand? She stared at him. And if I find them? His eyes were cold. Make sure they never get another chance. Then he walked out, boots echoing like gunshots. Maya sat alone in the silence for a long time. She found Danner on the flight line staring up at the mountains. The night was cold enough to bite. Floodlights painted the tarmac in harsh white, throwing long shadows from the parked helicopters. He told you, didn't he? Danner said without looking at her. She didn't ask how he knew. Yeah. Danner exhaled smoke from a contraband cigarette. You're not an investigator, Maya. You're a pilot. I'm the only one who walks through every part of this base without raising suspicion. Exactly why it's going to get you killed. She looked at him. You scared? Terrified, he said honestly. Good, she said. Stay that way. It'll keep us alive. Her first stop was the operations center. She walked in like she belonged there because she did. Banks of monitors glowed green in the dark. Analysts murmured into headsets, eyes flicking between satellite feeds and lines of code. The place smelled of stale coffee and sleeplessness. Lieutenant Kara Owens was at the mission board, pinning fresh intel maps. She was new, young, still trying too hard to look unshakable. Maya slid up beside her. Long night, Maya said casually. Owens snorted. I heard you turn the sky upside down. Mostly sideways. Maya glanced at the logs. Who had access to our flight plan? Owens frowned. Standard distribution. Command, Ops, Logistics, Flight Crew, Ranger CO. Anyone new? Half the analysts rotate in and out every 2 weeks. Why? Just curious. Owens studied her for a beat, then shrugged. Careful. Paranoia's contagious. Occupational hazard. Maya left before she could ask more. The logistics hub was quieter, filled with the rustle of paper and the whine of forklifts. Pallets of ammunition towered like tombstones. A civilian contractor hunched over a manifest, muttering to himself. His badge read Derek Cho. Maya leaned against the counter. You send out any fuel requests yesterday? He jumped. Yeah. Standard resupply for forward post Bravo 7. Why? That's near the Pesh Valley. Yeah. So? Who signed the order? He flipped through papers. Captain Eli Ward. Why? She smiled tightly. No reason. Or, she knew that name. Logistics officer. Quiet. Invisible. The kind of guy no one ever noticed. Which made him perfect. She found Ward 2 hours later in the mess hall eating alone. The place was nearly empty, just the low clatter of trays and the hum of refrigerators. She slid into the seat across from him. Captain. He looked up, startled. Thin face, pale eyes. Sergeant Rios. You're alive. Disappointed? Surprised? Funny thing, she said softly. Someone knew we were coming. They were waiting. Like they had our route. Our timetable. Our fuel load. His fork froze halfway to his mouth. She leaned closer. That's logistics data. Your world, isn't it? He swallowed. Are you accusing me? Not yet. Something flickered in his eyes. Then he smiled, small and cold. Be careful what you dig for, Sergeant. You might not like what's buried. She smiled back, all teeth. I fly through missile fire for fun. Try me. She left him sitting there, his food untouched. At 0200 she lay in her bunk, staring at the ceiling. Sleep was impossible. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the missile flash, heard the alarms, smelled blood on metal. Ward's words crawled in her head like insects. She got up. The Ghosthawk loomed in the hangar, half disassembled under work lights. Its skin was peeled back in places, revealing black skeleton and silver nerves. It looked like a wounded animal. Danner was asleep on a tool crate, arms crossed, head tilted back. Maya slipped into the cockpit, powered the systems to maintenance mode. The NAV computer hummed awake. She pulled the flight data from the last mission. Every waypoint, every altitude change, every fuel reading. There, an anomaly. A fuel order logged 12 hours before takeoff. Filed under her tail number. Except she hadn't requested it. Filed by E. Ward. Her jaw clenched. She killed the screen and slid out. The next morning, Briggs called an all-hands briefing. The room buzzed with tension. Vance stood at the back with his team, arms crossed, eyes like knives. Ward was near the side wall, looking utterly calm. Briggs's tone was clipped. Satellite confirms enemy forces retreating from the Pesh Valley. They've lost comms, coordination, and morale. This is our chance to break their back. We hit their supply lines now, they collapse before winter. Maps flicked on screen. Supply depots. Convoy routes. Fuel caches buried in the mountains. Rios, Briggs said. You're spearheading the strike. Multiple sorties. Low visibility, no margin for error. Maya's voice was flat. Understood. Her eyes met Ward's across the room. He smiled faintly. Briggs went on. This is the push that ends it. Get it done. Dismissed. Outside, Danner fell into step beside her. What's the plan? She kept her voice low. We fly. We win. And we watch who tries to kill us. He nodded slowly. And if it's him? Then I stop him. They walked in silence for a while. Snow crunched under their boots. Danner finally said, You know, most people don't volunteer to become bait. I'm not most people. Yeah, he said. That's what scares me. Night fell like a blade. The Ghosthawk crouched on the tarmac, shadow black and silent, engines humming. Maya sat in the cockpit, helmet on, hands steady on the controls. Danner strapped in beside her, eyes grim. In the cargo bay, crates of demolition charges gleamed under red lights. They were going to erase half the enemy's fuel reserves from the mountains. They lived long enough. Briggs's voice crackled in her headset. Ghosthawk, you are green. Godspeed. Maya keyed the comm copy. Lifting. The Ghosthawk rose like smoke, swallowed by the dark. As the base vanished behind them, Maya allowed herself one fleeting thought. If Ward had betrayed them once, he'd try again. And this time she'd be ready. The hunt had begun. The blast ripped through the compound like a thunderclap. Dust and shrapnel surged out from the southern wall, swallowing the world in a dirty brown cloud. Keller's ears rang with a high-pitched whine as she blinked through the grit, her breath ragged, her rifle clutched so tight her knuckles were bone white. The comms exploded with voices shouting over one another. Ambush! Ambush on the south wall. They've breached. Get those wounded out now. Ghosthawk, you hearing this? We need eyes overhead. Keller shoved a body off her legs, realized it was Corporal Diaz, unconscious but breathing, and dragged him behind a flipped table just as another explosion hammered the northern tower. Dust rained from the ceiling. The insurgents weren't probing anymore, they were storming the damn compound. Wraith to ground, I'm lifting off. Mia's voice cut through the chaos, low and sharp like a blade. Hold them off for 3 minutes. I'll clear the approach. Mia, the LZ's hot as hell, Keller started, but Mia cut her off. Then keep it warm for me. Her heart surged. God, she hated and loved that woman's calm. The roar of the Ghosthawk engines rose outside, slicing through the cacophony. Through the ragged window frame, Keller caught a glimpse of the sleek black silhouette rising vertically like an avenging wraith. Bullets sparked off its composite skin as the minigun mounted beneath spat a furious line of fire across the south wall breach. Shadows crumpled. Screams echoed. Dust blossomed. Ghosthawk clearing approach. "Get those charges ready," Mia snapped. Keller turned to the squad. "We hold this line. Nobody breaks through, you hear me? Diaz with me. Harris, watch that east flank like it owes you money." Harris, pale under the grime, cracked a grin. "Owes me a lot more than money, ma'am. Then collect later. Fight now." The southern breach boiled with movement, dark-clad figures surging through the hole, AKs blazing. Keller dropped two before they cleared the rubble, her rifle barking like a jackhammer. The others scattered as a 40mm grenade from somewhere behind her detonated, flinging bodies back like ragdolls. Gunfire shredded the air, and her ears filled with the familiar electric buzz of adrenaline. Training took over. Breath, aim, squeeze. Shift, aim, squeeze. Above, the Ghosthawk roared low, skimming the roofs like a shadow stitched to the earth. Its minigun howled again, mowing down a fresh wave trying to flank around the breach. A missile streaked from its wing pod, smashing into a technical truck that had been rolling up from the dunes. The blast washed the world in orange light. Keller ducked instinctively, felt heat lick her neck and kept shooting. Then came the silence, the sharp, dangerous kind like the air before lightning. The gunfire faltered. The screaming stopped. Dust hung in the sunbeams like gold flakes. Keller's finger trembled on her trigger. Nothing moved. Even her breath sounded too loud. "Ghosthawk to ground," Mia said. "Southern breach is clear, for now. I'm circling for overwatch." Keller exhaled. Her hands were shaking. She hadn't realized how close they'd come to getting overrun. She leaned against the table and wiped grime from her eyes. "Copy that, Ghosthawk. You saved our asses." "That's my job," Mia replied, voice lighter now. "Try not to make it so dramatic next time." Harris laughed, a short, incredulous bark. "Next time," she says. "Like this is a damn rehearsal." "Shut it and reload," Keller said, but even she couldn't hide the ghost of a smile. They spent the next 10 minutes reinforcing the breach with sandbags and scavenged sheet metal while the Ghosthawk prowled overhead like a watchful hawk. Every few minutes, Mia called out movement at the perimeter, giving them precious seconds to reposition. It was like having a god in the sky, and they all knew it. When the relief convoy finally arrived, a line of tan-armored MRAPs grinding through the dunes, the squad cheered hoarsely. Medics poured out, rushing the wounded inside. Keller helped carry Diaz to the waiting stretcher, muttering something about him owing her a beer when he woke up. He gave a weak thumbs up before passing out again. The compound was secure for now. But as the adrenaline faded, a strange emptiness settled over her. The attack had been too organized, too precise. Insurgents didn't coordinate like that on their own. Someone had fed them intel. Someone wanted them dead. As if hearing her thoughts, Mia's voice came over private comms. "We need to talk, Keller." "Off the record." Keller frowned. "About what?" "About who gave them our location." Night fell heavy and starless over the outpost, the desert swallowing the horizon in black. The squad slept in ragged shifts, curled on cots and floor mats, rifles within reach. Keller sat outside on an ammo crate, helmet off, sweat cooling on her scalp, listening to the wind hum through the broken wall. The compound smelled like burned concrete and coppery blood. The soft whine of turbines made her glance up. The Ghosthawk glided down like a phantom, landing just outside the wall with barely a whisper. Its dark hull gleamed faintly under the weak floodlights. The cockpit opened and Mia climbed out, flight suit still dusty from the day's chaos. She carried 2 steaming mugs and a worn folder. "Coffee?" Mia offered, dropping beside her on the crate. "You're a saint," Keller muttered, accepting the mug. It smelled like burnt motor oil in heaven. They drank in silence for a moment, the night pressing close around them. Then Mia opened the folder. Photos spilled out, blurry satellite images, maps with red marks, lists of names. Keller scanned them, brow furrowing. "These were in the flight logs I intercepted before we lifted," Mia said. "Somebody's been leaking our patrol schedules, supply routes, even the names of our personnel." "The attack today?" "It was timed down to the second." "Who the hell has access to that?" Keller whispered. "High clearance. Command level or intel. Somebody close." Keller clenched her jaw. Betrayal had a taste, metallic and sour. "Why tell me?" "Because you're the only one who won't look at me like I'm paranoid." Mia's smile was faint and tired. "And because if I'm right, we're both already targets." The desert wind hissed over the walls. Keller stared at the dark, at the endless empty miles stretching to the horizon. The war was already eating them alive. Now I wanted their trust too. She met Mia's eyes. Then we find them. Quietly. Mia nodded once. Quietly. Over the next days they built their conspiracy like they built their defenses, quiet piece by piece. Between patrols and resupply runs, Keller slipped into the comms hut to scan message logs, looking for anomalies. Mia used her access codes to download encrypted flight schedules, cross-referencing them with attack times. Every pattern they uncovered painted the same picture. Someone was handing their enemies a roadmap. And the trail kept circling back to Forward Command Bravo 200 miles east, where all their missions were greenlit. Meanwhile, the war didn't stop to let them play detective. The squad was thrown into firefight after firefight, convoy ambushes, sniper nests in half-collapsed mosques, IEDs buried under fake asphalt. Each mission frayed them thinner. Harris stopped joking. Diaz woke up only to get shipped to Field Hospital for shrapnel removal. Keller found herself sleeping less and less, the lines between exhaustion and adrenaline blurring. But every time she thought about quitting, about letting it go, she remembered the way Mia had said it. If I'm right, we're both already targets. Then came the day the order dropped. A high-value target was spotted near Bravo's sector. Command ordered Keller's unit to move out immediately for extraction support. It stank like bait. She could feel it in her bones. As they loaded into the convoy, she pulled Mia aside. This is it. This is the setup. I know, Mia said, checking her sidearm. I'll be in the air watching everything. Promise me, Keller said. If it goes sideways, you get them out. Mia's gaze softened just for a heartbeat. Only if you're on that list. The convoy rolled into the desert under a bleached sky. Heat shimmered off the hoods, the smell of hot metal and dust thick in the air. For hours, nothing but empty dunes. No birds. No movement. The silence felt surgical, like something had cut the world open and scooped it clean. Then the lead MRAP hit the pressure plate. The explosion turned the world inside out. Fire tore the vehicle apart in a blooming orange flower. Shrapnel hammered the convoy. Keller screamed orders, diving behind the nearest wheel well as gunfire erupted from the ridge to their west. Figures swarmed the crest, black silhouettes against the sun, RPG trails arcing down like burning spears. Ambush! Ambush! Get to cover! She roared, even as her own words were drowned by the shriek of missiles. And then the sky screamed back. The Ghosthawk came down like judgment, engines howling, twin miniguns carving burning arcs across the ridge. Bodies crumpled. Rockets disintegrated midair. Keller watched through smoke-stung eyes as Mia dove so low her rotors skimmed the sand, firing, rolling, vanishing into her own dust cloud and reappearing on the other side like something unreal. Keller seized the moment, rallying her team. Push west. Clear the ridge while they're pinned. They moved like ghosts through the smoke, shapes within shapes, her rifle bucking against her shoulder. Every step forward felt borrowed. Harris caught a round through the thigh but kept firing from his knees. Keller dragged him behind a boulder and kept moving. The Ghosthawk screamed overhead again, shredding the enemy's retreating trucks. Minutes stretched like wire. And then it was over. The ridge was empty. Bodies and fire and silence. The only sound was the hiss of cooling metal and the Ghosthawk's turbines idling as it hovered low, a dark angel against the dying sun. Keller collapsed onto the sand, chest heaving. Her ears rang. Her vision swam. They'd lived. Barely. She could feel it. This had been meant to wipe them out. Someone had set the trap. Someone high. Mia's voice crackled in her earpiece. You still breathing? Barely, Keller croaked. Good. Because we're not done. A pause, then quieter. I intercepted a transmission during the fight. Coordinates. It originated from Bravo. And it was sent before we left. Keller stared at the horizon, where the sun bled into the sand like a wound. The trap hadn't just failed. It had given them their proof. We finished this, she whispered. Yes, Mia said. But we'll be ghosts when we do. The Ghosthawk tilted its nose, engines roaring, and rose into the darkening sky. Keller watched it vanish into the sun's last light, her heartbeat steadying, her path sharpening like a blade. The war was no longer just about survival. Now it was personal. The desert night swallowed their convoy as it limped back to the outpost, the vehicles riddled with holes, their tires shredded, windshields spiderwebbed with cracks. The smell of scorched metal and blood clung to everything like a curse. Keller rode in silence in the back of the last MRAP, helmet on her lap, sweat drying on her face. Harris lay beside her on a stretcher, pale and biting his lip to stay conscious. She squeezed his shoulder once, gently, before pulling her gaze to the black horizon. Her mind was already elsewhere, at Forward Command Bravo. Mia had gone silent after dropping the last enemy truck, vanishing into the dusk like her namesake. But Keller knew she hadn't gone far. They'd agreed without words. Tonight they wouldn't wait for orders or approvals. Whoever had tried to kill them would try again, and she wasn't going to give them another chance. When they finally rolled back through the battered gates of their compound, Keller gave perfunctory reports to the medics and logistics sergeant, then ducked away before anyone could corner her. She stripped off her armor in the shadows behind the comms hut, leaving only her fatigues and sidearm. Her hands shook, not from fear but from the fierce clarity that sometimes came after almost dying. The soft hiss of turbines reached her ears a moment later. She looked up to see the Ghosthawk descending like a phantom beyond the southern wall, no lights, no fanfare. Mia stepped out as silent as the machine itself, helmet under her arm, face unreadable in the starlight. "You sure about this?" Keller asked quietly. "No," Mia said. "But I'm not waiting to get blown up in my sleep." "Then let's burn the mask off." They said nothing else as they moved. Keller grabbed a small pack from her quarters, water, rations, and encrypted drive sheet stolen from the comms hut earlier that day. Mia prepped the Ghosthawk with mechanical precision, her movements almost meditative. Within minutes they were airborne, the black fuselage swallowing the moonlight, slipping into the sky like a blade sliding into flesh. The desert sprawled beneath them, endless and empty. Wind hissed around the cockpit canopy. Keller strapped into the co-pilot's seat, headset crackling with static, her stomach clenching with each jolt of turbulence. She'd been in this bird dozens of times before, but tonight it felt different, like stepping off a cliff while daring gravity to blink. "You ever think," Keller said after a long stretch of silence, "that maybe we don't walk away from this one?" Mia didn't look at her. "Every day. I just fly faster than the thought." Keller gave a small, grim smile. "Figures." The flight to Bravo took 2 hours. As they neared, Mia killed their running lights and brought them low, skimming just above the sand. Forward Command Bravo rose from the dark like a fortress, concrete walls bristling with floodlights and antennae. Rows of armored vehicles sat parked in geometric perfection. The landing pads glowed faintly with blue perimeter lights. Keller's pulse quickened. "They'll see us coming." "No," Mia said, flicking switches. The Ghosthawk's systems purred softly, and the bird seemed to dissolve into the dark. "They won't see what isn't there." Keller stared at her. "We're cloaked. Partial stealth mode. Reflective shroud and radar ghosting. Don't tell supply, they'll want receipts." "God, you're insane," Keller muttered, but she couldn't suppress the thrill crawling up her spine. Mia brought the Ghosthawk in from the east, where the wind was strongest, masking their approach. They slipped over the wall like a shadow and set down silently on a deserted maintenance pad behind the hangars. No alarms. No movement. Keller exhaled slowly. "We're in." They moved fast, hunched low between the hulking shapes of parked vehicles, their boots whispering on the concrete. The air smelled of fuel and hot metal. Distant voices drifted from the mess hall, laughter and clinking dishes. Bravo slept easy. Keller hated them a little for that. Their target was the main operations hub at the center of the compound, a squat, windowless building wrapped in antennas and satellite dishes like a steel hedgehog. That's where mission orders were processed, flight schedules logged, and transmissions routed. If the mole existed, their fingerprints would be in there. Mia produced a slim device from her flight vest, a black rectangle with blinking green lights. "Signal sniffer," she whispered. "It'll ping any unauthorized outbound bursts." "You cover me?" "Always," Keller said. They slipped through the rear service door using Mia's override chip. The corridor beyond was dark and smelled faintly of ozone. Keller's boots made no sound on the tile as they moved, weapons drawn. They passed empty offices, stacks of map cases, humming servers shedding faint blue light. The only sounds were their breathing and the low hum of cooling fans. In the core server room, Mia knelt beside a terminal, jacking her sniffer into the port. Lines of code cascaded over her visor. Keller kept watch at the door, eyes flicking over every shadow. Her heart was a metronome. "Got something?" Mia murmured. A ghost ping routed through an inactive satellite relay. Origin logged under Lieutenant Colonel Anders. Keller's mouth went dry. Anders was Bravo's operations chief. The one who signed every deployment order, every patrol schedule, including theirs. "Timestamp?" she asked. 2 hours before your convoy left." Mia's tone was flat, lethal. "It's him." Keller's gut twisted. It made horrible sense. Anders had access to everything. He could plan their deaths from behind a desk. Copy the logs, Keller said. Then we cut the snake's head off. Working on it. Mia's fingers flew. Keller's nerves buzzed like high voltage. This was too easy. Too quiet. Then the alarm shrieked. Red light flared down the corridor. Shouting voices. Boots pounding tile. Keller swore under her breath and yanked Mia up. Go, she barked. They bolted down the corridor as the intercom blared. Unauthorized access detected in server room. All units respond. Mia stuffed the sniffer back into her vest as they ran. Keller's lungs burned. They burst through the service door into the night just as a squad of MPs rounded the far corner, rifles raised. Freeze, one shouted. Keller threw a flashbang and turned away as it detonated, white fire swallowing the world. The MPs screamed, blinded. Keller and Mia sprinted for the maintenance pad. Bullets sparked off the concrete around them. The Ghosthawk loomed ahead like salvation. Mia vaulted into the cockpit while Keller covered her, returning fire in controlled bursts. The rotors roared to life. Wind blasted her face. She dove aboard as rounds slammed into the hull, and then they were rising, the ground dropping away in a blur of lights and shouting soldiers. Tracers streaked past. Mia rolled the Ghosthawk hard left, and the night swallowed them whole. They didn't speak for 5 minutes, just sat breathing hard while the desert slipped back beneath them. Finally, Keller rasped, "You get the files?" Mia grinned wild-eyed. Every last bite. Keller let out a laugh that was half sob. "Goddamn. We did it." "Not yet," Mia said, sobering. "We've got proof but no leverage. If we go public, Command will bury it. We need Anders to confess or slip." Keller nodded slowly, the pieces clicking together. "We force him into the open." "Exactly." They flew through the night, black on black, until the first hint of dawn bled across the horizon. Back at their outpost, they slipped the Ghosthawk into its camo shroud and crept into the barracks just as the squad was waking. No one questioned why Keller's hands shook during breakfast or why Mia vanished to the hangar without a word. They spent the day crafting a trap. Using the stolen logs, Mia fabricated a false operations order, an ambush bait mission supposedly targeting a high-value insurgent convoy. The order looked perfect, complete with command signatures forged by Mia's deft hand. Then they slipped it into the server queue at Bravo using the same backdoor Anders had used. If Anders was feeding intel to the enemy, he wouldn't resist passing it along. And when the insurgents showed up at the exact coordinates, they'd be waiting. By nightfall, the false mission was live. Keller led her squad out into the desert, grim but silent, every one of them trusting her without knowing why. They dug in around the fake ambush site, an abandoned fuel depot half swallowed by dunes. Mia circled above in the Ghosthawk, her voice a steady ghost in Keller's ear. Hours crawled by. Wind howled through the skeletal fuel towers. The sun dropped and darkness pooled in the sand. Then just past midnight, Mia's voice snapped through comms, sharp and electric. "Contacts. Eastridge. 12 trucks. Full guns. It's them." Keller's pulse spiked. It had worked. "Hold fire," she whispered. "Let them get closer." The convoy rolled down like a tide of steel, headlights off, engines snarling. Black-clad fighters clung to the trucks, rifles gleaming in the moonlight. The perfect ambush, if they'd been the prey. "Now," Keller hissed. The night exploded. Claymores shredded the lead trucks. Mortars rained from hidden pits. The Ghosthawk dropped from the clouds like a guillotine, miniguns screaming. The convoy disintegrated in seconds. Flames, bodies, shattered steel. Survivors scattered into the dunes, where Keller's squad cut them down. It was over in less than 3 minutes. "Clean sweep," Mia said, voice hard. But they didn't come alone. Picking up a high-band transmission from Bravo. "It's Anders. He's watching." Keller's jaw clenched. They had their proof now. Anders had reacted the moment his pawns were hit. "Trace it," she said. "Already did," Mia replied. Encrypted SAT burst to an offshore relay. "But the origin is dead center in Bravo's ops tower." Keller stared at the burning wrecks. This was it. The mask was cracking. "Time to end this," she said. Mia's voice softened. "We're walking into a fortress. Then we make it a tomb." The plan was mad. Reckless. Possibly suicidal. And Keller had never felt more certain of anything. At dawn, they would return to Bravo not as ghosts, but as hunters. Under the blistering Afghan sun, the wind howled across the high desert plateau, carrying the acrid tang of burned diesel and scorched sand. The forward operating base lay hunkered like a wounded beast, its perimeter walls pockmarked with shrapnel scars from the night's mortar barrage. Inside the chaos, Sergeant Alexandra Reyes sat in the belly of the Sikorsky U-60 Ghosthawk, helmet off, head bowed, and hands trembling, not from fear but from the adrenaline drain that followed battle. She could still feel the shockwave of the blast that had sent her spinning into the wreckage, still hear Mason's last sharp intake of breath through the comms before static swallowed his voice forever. Mason was gone. Gone, and yet every time she closed her eyes she saw him, half-turned, smiling crookedly, like he always did when he was about to make a sarcastic remark. She had led them into that canyon. She had chosen to fly low, nap of the earth, trying to dodge radar and enemy eyes. And it had worked, until it didn't. An improvised rocket, likely heat-seeking, had stitched the sky with white fire. Reyes had thrown the Ghosthawk into a dive, skimming the rock face so close the rotor tips shaved sparks, but Mason's bird, flying wingman, had taken the hit. 1 second he was there, the next, a sunburst and a black spiral down into nothing. She had wanted to dive after him, to claw through the smoke and fire and drag him out, but command had barked in her ear, "Abort. Abort. Get your crew home alive." Now the crew wasn't speaking to her. They respected her, sure. They obeyed orders, maintained their discipline. But the easy banter, the gallows humor that usually filled the cargo bay between missions, was gone. Corporal Nash just stared out the hatch door at the heat-shimmering tarmac. Chief Warrant Officer Lee barely grunted when addressed. Even Spencer, the youngest and normally the loudest, had gone silent. She could feel their grief like static in the air, like she was sitting inside a thundercloud waiting to break. The commander had said nothing, yet. He had simply looked at her with those hard, unreadable eyes as she limped the Ghosthawk back to base. But the silence from him was worse than anger. It meant judgment was coming. They were wheels up again by noon. The mission came down without ceremony. Extract an embedded Special Forces recon team from a remote village deep in enemy-held territory. Intelligence had confirmed that enemy fighters, possibly remnants of ISIS-K, were massing for an assault. The team on the ground was cut off, low on ammo and running out of time. No one else could get there fast enough. Reyes checked the weapon systems herself, hands moving automatically, every bolt and hydraulic line like part of her own body. The Ghosthawk gleamed black and lethal under the desert sun, its stealth lines swallowing light, its engines growling like chained predators. It was fast, silent, and invisible to most radar, but not invincible. She knew that better than anyone. As they lifted off, Nash leaned close to her headset. "We don't have to do this, Sarge. We could wait for backup." Reyes didn't look at him. "Backup's 2 hours out. They've got 20 minutes. "Yeah," Nash muttered. "That's what I was afraid you'd say." They skimmed the ground, flying so low that sand streaked across the cockpit glass. The mountains rose ahead, jagged teeth tearing at the horizon. Reyes threaded them with impossible precision, dipping through narrow canyons where the sun barely touched, rolling the Ghosthawk on her axis to slither through gaps no wider than a truck. She could feel her crew's eyes on her, the silent question in their stares. "Are you trying to get us killed or save us?" Maybe both. She wasn't sure anymore. They reached the village just as it was dying. Smoke coiled from shattered buildings. Tracers stitched the sky. Through the chaos, Reyes spotted the recon team's flare, red smoke curling from a rooftop half-collapsed from shelling. "Contact left, RPGs on the ridge." Lee barked. "Countermeasures hot," Reyes snapped. The Ghosthawk spat flares like fireflies. A rocket streaked past their nose, close enough that the shockwave punched the hull. Reyes killed the forward thrust and dropped like a stone, slamming into a hover barely 10 feet off the rooftop. Nash and Spencer kicked the ropes out and fast roped down into the maelstrom. Gunfire chewed the air around them. 30 seconds. Reyes yelled. Bullets pinged against the armor plating, snapping past the open side doors. Spencer came back first, dragging a bloodied man slung over his shoulder. Nash followed with 2 more, one barely conscious. The last operator, a huge man with half his face blackened from burns, staggered onto the skids just as an enemy truck burst from the alley below, a machine gun hammering. Reyes swung the Ghosthawk sideways, presenting its armored flank, and opened the minigun. The roar drowned everything. The truck vaporized in a gout of flame and splintered metal. "Everyone's aboard," Lee shouted. Reyes yanked the collective. The Ghosthawk leapt skyward, clearing the rooftops by inches. Below, the village dissolved in fire. She didn't look back. By the time they landed, her hands were shaking so hard she could barely unclip her harness. The medics swarmed the wounded. Nash slumped on the skid, sweat cutting rivers through the dust on his face. He looked at her, and for the first time since Mason's death, he didn't look angry. Just tired. That night, Reyes sat alone in the maintenance hangar, the Ghosthawk looming over her like a shadow cast by her own soul. She drank stale coffee and stared at the rotors until her vision blurred. When the commander came, she didn't hear him at first. "You should be dead," he said softly. "Maybe," she said. He stepped closer, the fluorescent lights etching hard lines into his weathered face. "You disobeyed direct protocol on that canyon run. You risked your team. Mason is gone." "I know. Do you?" His voice sharpened. "Because you keep flying like you're trying to pay for it with your life. And if you keep this up, you will." She looked at him then, and something in her eyes made him pause. Not defiance, not guilt. Just emptiness. "I have to fly," she said. "It's the only time I can breathe." He stared at her for a long moment. Then he nodded, almost imperceptibly. "Then fly. But bring them back alive, Reyes. All of them. Or I will pull you out of that cockpit myself." She didn't answer. She just touched the Ghosthawk's skin like it was a living thing and went back to work. The next day they were sent on recon, simple supposedly. But nothing about it felt simple. They were tasked to shadow a convoy suspected of moving high-value targets for an insurgent cell. The catch: the convoy was cutting through the Hindu Kush Mountains, terrain so hostile even satellites struggled to see. As they flew into the teeth of the range, the world narrowed to the green glow of her night vision goggles and the rhythmic hum of the rotors. Spencer whispered over comms, "Feels like flying into the mouth of hell." "Hell doesn't have mountains," Reyes said. Half an hour in, they spotted the convoy, 4 technicals bristling with guns, crawling along a goat trail carved into a cliffside. Reyes held the Ghosthawk steady above and behind them, ghost silent. Then Lee's voice tight. "Movement at R9. Fast movers." 3 enemy helicopters knifed out of the darkness, attack variants, lights cold, weapons hot. "Break!" Reyes shouted, slamming the Ghosthawk into a dive so violent her harness bit deep into her ribs. Missiles slashed through the air they had occupied a second earlier. Countermeasures. Flares burst like dying stars. Nash returned fire with the side-mounted minigun, tracers carving red scars across the night. 1 enemy bird spiraled down, trailing smoke. The others pressed in, herding them toward the cliffs. Reyes gritted her teeth. "Hang on." She pitched the Ghosthawk into a canyon so narrow the blades almost kissed the stone. The enemy pilots followed, confident, closing the noose. Reyes let them, dragging them deeper, lower, until the walls pressed so tight they could barely maneuver. Then she cut power to 1 engine and kicked the tail hard. The Ghosthawk skidded sideways, momentum carrying it around a blind corner like a drifting car. The enemy didn't see the corner coming. One slammed into the rock face and exploded in a bloom of fire. The last survivor pulled up sharply, trying to escape the canyon. Reyes surged after him, full power, climbing almost vertically. At the apex, she inverted the Ghosthawk, rolling upside down above him, then snapped back level and unleashed a burst from the chin cannon. The rounds stitched across his fuselage. He fireballed and fell. For a long time, there was only their ragged breathing in the headsets. Holy shit," Spencer gasped. "You're insane." "Maybe," Reyes said. "But we're alive." They limped home on 1 screaming engine, the Ghosthawk bleeding hydraulic fluid but still flying. The mechanics swarmed her like worried parents when they landed, but Reyes barely heard them. For the first time in days her crew was smiling. Laughing even. They were starting to trust her again. That night, Reyes sat on the Ghosthawk's ramp, staring out at the dark desert and thinking of Mason. She didn't cry. She never did. But she whispered into the wind, so softly no one could hear, "I'll bring them home. I promise." And far out in the Black Mountains, unseen by any of them, another fire flickered to life. A beacon on a distant ridge. A signal from someone who should have been dead. Mason's call sign. Night draped itself over the Hindu Kush like a funeral shroud, the peaks jagged silhouettes against a sky freckled with cold stars. At Forward Operating Base Narang, the air was still, brittle with anticipation. The hangar lights threw pale halos across the tarmac where the Sikorsky UH-60 Ghosthawk crouched, its black fuselage gleaming like an oil-slicked predator. Sergeant Alexandra Reyes stood at its nose, helmet under her arm, staring at the small blinking dot on the tactical screen strapped to her forearm. The dot pulsed with impossible certainty. Mason's call sign. It had come 3 hours ago, a short, coded burst on an encrypted channel that had been dead since the canyon ambush. The odds it was real were infinitesimal. The odds it was a trap were astronomical. And yet Reyes hadn't hesitated. her commander had said flat and cold, "You can't be sure it's him." She'd looked him dead in the eye and replied, "Then I'll make sure." Now her crew waited behind her like shadows, silent in the darkness. Nash adjusted his body armor with jerky motions, jaw tight. Spencer fidgeted, restless energy radiating off him. Chief Warrant Officer Lee just watched her, eyes hooded but sharp, the way he always did when he was about to follow her into something suicidal. "Here's the play," Reyes said finally. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "We go dark. Low and fast. We verify the source of the signal. If it's Mason, we bring him home. If it's not," she let the sentence die. They all knew what it meant. Spencer broke the silence. "If this is a trap, they'll be waiting with everything they've got." "Good," Reyes said, sliding her helmet on. "Then we won't have to go looking for them." They launched into the night. The Ghosthawk rose like a phantom, engines whispering, rotors slicing the cold air. Below, the base shrank to a dim constellation of lights and was gone. They flew without running lights, invisible against the dark mountains. The world collapsed to the hiss of static in their headsets and the green glow of the terrain on Reyes's HUD. Valleys yawned beneath them like black chasms. The peaks closed in, serrated knives against the sky. An hour in, Nash's voice crackled softly. "Signal strength increasing. Bearing 015. Reyes nudged the cyclic. The Ghosthawk banked, silent as a hunting hawk. The signal led them to a high plateau flanked by sheer cliffs. As they crested the ridge, a flicker of light winked from the rocks below. 3 short pulses. Pause. 3 more. Mason's code. Reyes's throat tightened. "Thermal shows 2 heat signatures," Lee murmured. "Could be him, could be bait." "Rope in," Reyes ordered. They dropped fast and hard. Nash and Spencer rappelled into the darkness, boots thudding on stone. For a long moment there was nothing, just the wind keening through the crags. Then Nash's voice, low and disbelieving. "It's him." Reyes's heart lurched. They hauled him up on the hoist like a ghost risen from the grave. Mason looked like hell, beard ragged, face gaunt, eyes sunken but burning with defiant life. His arm was in a crude sling, and his uniform was half shredded, but he was standing. Alive. The second they were aboard, Reyes yanked the Ghosthawk skyward. "Explain," she snapped, more to keep from shaking than anything. Mason managed a crooked grin, teeth flashing in his dirt-caked face. "Woke up in a ravine. Crawled. It. Watched the bastards tear apart my bird. Been playing dead for 2 weeks. Spencer gawked. 2 weeks? How the hell? "Rats," Mason said deadpan. "And rainwater. Highly recommend the vintage." Even Lee cracked the ghost of a smile. But Reyes barely heard them. Relief burned through her like a fever, almost painful. Mason was back. She had done it. Then the first missile hit. The blast punched the Ghosthawk sideways, alarms screaming, shrapnel rattling off the hull. Reyes fought the controls, muscles screaming. "Contact rear, fast movers." Lee barked. "Multiple, 6. No 8 bogeys," Nash added, voice rising. Reyes's mind snapped cold and sharp. They waited until he lit his beacon. They wanted us to come. Another missile streaked past, close enough that the heat washed through the cockpit. Flares out. Brilliant fireballs streaked into the night. The Ghosthawk clawed for altitude, weaving and juking like a living thing. The enemy helicopters closed from every direction, wolves converging on prey. Spencer's voice cracked. "We can't outrun them." "We're not going to outrun them," Reyes said. "We're going to break them." She flipped the Ghosthawk on her side and dove, plummeting into a canyon so tight it felt like flying through a rifle barrel. The enemy chased, rotor wash buffeting the canyon walls. "Arm the belly charges," Reyes ordered. Nash twisted in his seat, eyes wide. "That's not a thing." "It is now." She skimmed the river at the canyon floor, the walls blurring past at knife-edge distance. Her thumb danced across the console, priming the emergency fuel cells. At the last possible second, she yanked the stick, slinging the Ghosthawk up and over a stone arch that spanned the canyon. As they cleared it, she triggered the charges she had jerry-rigged days ago for a demolition op that had never launched. The arch disintegrated in a flash of white fire. Behind them, the canyon collapsed in an avalanche of stone and flame. The pursuing helicopters slammed into the debris or veered off wildly. 2 didn't make it. The rest scattered like startled crows. The Ghosthawk rocketed out of the canyon and into the open sky, the stars spinning overhead. For a moment there was only silence. Then Mason laughed. A raw, wild bark of sound. "You're still insane," he said hoarsely. Reyes risked a quick glance back at him. And you're still alive. Don't ruin it. They weren't clear yet. The radar pinged, for survivors regrouping, chasing hard. Fuel was bleeding fast from a shrapnel gouge. They wouldn't make it back to forward operating base Narung before they were caught. Reyes's mind raced. Options, terrain, speed, distance, none of it added up to survival. Unless... She banked hard toward the northeast. Base is west, Spencer said. New plan, Reyes said. Does it involve not dying? Nash asked. Mostly. She aimed for the Tora Bora Massif, an old warren of caves once used by Al-Qaeda, long abandoned but still mapped in the classified archives. If they could draw the enemy inside and collapse it behind them, they might vanish. Or bury themselves alive. The Ghosthawk screamed through the darkness. The enemy closed, missiles streaking past, chewing the sky. Mason grabbed the side handle, knuckles white, but he said nothing. They hit the cave mouth doing 180 knots. Stone blurred past inches from the wingtips. The enemy plunged in after them. Inside was chaos, stalactites like fangs, pillars like jagged teeth. Reyes flew through it like a madwoman, rolling, diving, skimming the floor. Sparks sprayed from the skids. One enemy clipped a rock spire and detonated, fire washing through the cavern. Charges armed, Lee said tightly. Do it, Reyes said. As they burst from the far end of the cave, Lee thumbed the remote. The entrance behind them imploded. A shockwave chased them out into the night, hurling the Ghosthawk forward like a slingshot. The surviving enemy craft didn't make it. And suddenly there was only quiet. The crew sat frozen, breathing hard, eyes huge in the green glow of the console. Then Nash exhaled shakily. We're alive. For now, Reyes said, but her voice was soft. They limped back to base on fumes, the Ghosthawk listing but loyal to the last. The landing skids kissed the tarmac and she cut the engines. The silence after the rotor spin down was deafening. When they opened the side door, the dawn was bleeding over the horizon, staining the desert gold. Mason stepped down first. The base froze. Men and women stared, mouths open as if they were seeing a ghost. Then someone whooped, raw and disbelieving, and the cheers spread like wildfire. Reyes just sat in the cockpit, helmet in her lap, hands trembling at last. She felt hollow, scraped clean. The commander appeared at the edge of the pad, arms folded. His eyes went from Mason to Reyes and back, unreadable. You brought him home, he said finally. Reyes nodded once. You disobeyed every standing order, violated airspace protocols, and detonated half a mountain. Yes, sir. A beat of silence. Then, good work. And he walked away. Later, when the chaos died down, Reyes found Mason sitting on the Ghosthawk's ramp, legs dangling. He looked up as she approached, a crooked half-smile on his bruised face. You came for me, he said simply. Always, she said. For a while they sat in silence, watching the sun climb. The air was sharp and clean, and for the first time in weeks, Reyes felt like she could breathe. But out beyond the wire, far to the east, a new plume of smoke was rising on the horizon. The black. Wrong. Reyes stared at it, and a cold knot coiled in her gut. This wasn't over. Not even close. The end.